Of course, motherfuckers, they come in and can against me, so what are you gonna say? Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have here, that I go where I can, of course, but okay, I'm gonna take you here. Of course, you have to stay home, of course, motherfucker, why do you go there? Of course, that is what you can have. How many people do you send to die? Of course, motherfuckers, and the people who sent you to die in those islands are the same people who throw us from planes just because we thought we could change the game, just because we thought we could have a democratic strong state with state-owned companies and play some Catan there. Of course, that is what you can have here. Of course, that is what you can have. That is what we thought. Of course, that is what you can have. And we throw us from planes and send people to die. Why do we go there? Of course, we are sending people to die. Why do you go there? Stay home. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. Of course, that is what you can have. That no one can against us. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, if you tell me that the people who sent us to die were good people, okay, but it was a dictatorship who sent us to die on those islands. Of course, that is what you can have. Stay home, motherfucker, that is what you can have. That no one can against us, so come on. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can see. That you are a Caesarian, so don't neglect. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. That no one can against us. That you are a Caesarian, so don't neglect. That is what you can have. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, motherfucker, everyone wants that my kids are the kids from God and things like that. Of course, everyone wants that my kids are the incarnation from God and things like that. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. What I don't want. Of course, I'm gonna Caesarian and I'm not gonna neglect. That is what you can have here, so come on. Of course, that is what you can have. That I'm gonna change the game. That is what you can have. That no one can against us. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. That no one can against me, so what are you gonna say? Of course, that is what you can see. That no one can against me, so what are you gonna say? Of course, motherfucker, we are not Caesarians, so don't neglect. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have here. Of course, that is what you can see. That everyone wants that my kids are the son from God, or things like those. Of course, everyone wants that my kids are the son from God. Of course, that is what you can see. That no one can against me, so what are you gonna say? Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, that is what you can see. Of course, that is what you can have here. That no one can against me. Of course, that is what you can have here. That everyone knows that they crucify God. Of course, and that my kids are the son from Him. Of course, that is what you can have. That we are not Caesarian and I'm not gonna neglect. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, when if someone comes and says that he is the king from everything, I'm gonna say to him that we are not Caesarian and that he don't have to neglect. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, that is what you can have. That no one can against me, so what are you gonna say? Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. The king from everything wants to come. Of course, forget about those. Of course, we are here in democracy. Of course, we don't need kings. That is what you can say. That we need democracy. We have to elect our presidents. Of course, that is what you can have. That we don't want kings. Of course, that is what you can have. That we are not Caesarian and we are not gonna neglect. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have. That everyone wants that my kids are the son from God. Of course, that is what you can have to let me without breathing. That my kids are the son from God. Of course, motherfucker, but I'm not gonna give my money to a death guy. I'm gonna give my money to the strippers, of course, because it's I love better. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have first. What are you gonna say? Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against me, so what are you gonna say? Of course, motherfucker, why do you go there? Stay home, motherfucker, you're like a dictator who present us to die. Of course, motherfucker, we wanna stay home. Of course, we wanna elect our president and have a strong state without debts and state-owned companies and pay some content when you throw us from the plane, motherfucker. Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against us, that you're sending us to die. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, stay home. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that no one can against us, so what are you gonna say? Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that no one can against us. Of course, we are a Caesarian, so don't neglect, motherfucker. Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. Of course, that is what you can see, that no one can against me. So what are you gonna say? Of course, you want to be the king from everything, you wanna be the emperor from everything. Of course, forget about me, that is what you can see, that no one can against me. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. So what are you gonna say? Forget about me and go out from here and stay home. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that we're not Caesarian, so don't neglect. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. Of course, that is the ones that make kids are the one from God, and give a bill to God and pray to somewhere. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, but I'm not gonna be there. That is what you can have, that we're the Caesarian and you're not gonna neglect. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. So what are you gonna say? Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. So what are you gonna say? Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that we the only thing we want is to stay at home. Of course, that is what you can have, that we want strong states with democracy and state-owned companies and some companies for us from planes. Of course, motherfuckers, and send us to die on those islands. Of course, motherfucker, dictatorship send us to die on those islands. Of course, stay home. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have. Of course, that is what you can see, that no one can against us. So what are you gonna say? Of course, stay home. That is what you can have, that no one can against me. Of course, motherfucker, so I changed the game. That is what you can have. You're like a silence, so don't neglect. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. Of course, motherfuckers, everyone wants that make kids like the son from God. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that we want that make kids are the son from God and that hang and give a bill to God and pray to God. Of course, motherfuckers, but I'm not gonna be there. Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. So what are you gonna say? I'm gonna forget about you. That is what you can have, that no one can against me. That I'm not what you can have, and that no one is gonna take my money. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have, that I'm gonna keep what's mine, that I'm not gonna give my money to God, I'm gonna give my money to the to bust that is what you can have because that is what they want. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have to them. Gonna forget about the age of stay home. Of course, motherfuckers, and we're not gonna tell us from plans with me. Silence with them. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have. Of course, that into my grave. Of course, I'm not gonna give them to you. Gonna hang me, of course. Make you come. That no one can engage me. Give me way to God, but I'm not gonna allow it. Of course, motherfuckers.